Hi everyone and welcome to this week's Monday Memo. Now, there's two types of finance professional out there, and you've probably come across them at one stage or another, or even been those types yourself. And what I'm talking about is there's generally the first type who are really good at identifying things or issues, maybe some leakage within the various cash inflows or outflows, or even an opportunity for the business to go and create more money or reduce risk in some way. And they've even identified on what has to happen and how to make it happen. But they struggle to try and get others to see it from their point of view and even adopt those ideas and insights. And then there's others who just seem to effortlessly be able to get buy-in for any ideas they come up with. So, it was quite interesting. I was on a webinar with a good friend of the show, Khaled Chowdhury, his BeastBI webinar. And we discussed three essential ingredients together that might actually help you get better adoption and buy-in around your ideas. And the first point we discussed actually came from Khaled, which is something to do with familiarity. And what Khaled was using was an example of research done around music and songs, actually, to be particular. And the researchers had gone away and identified the attributes that were required to create the perfect song. I mean, think of the likes of, Gangnam Style, that sort of sticks in your head, those song worms, and there's others out there. But what they found then when they released those types of songs into the mainstream, they didn't seem to gain as much traction as they thought they would. So they went away and thought about things a bit more and realised that there was a way to actually gain traction. And what it was they started sandwiching those songs in between songs others were already familiar with, the listeners were familiar with. So what you do, you take that track and you'd put it between a sort of a well-known song that was doing well in the charts, and on the other side put another well-known chart song in there. And then during the listening process, those listening into the music seem to take and recognise it much faster and adopt it into their own sort of listening habits and playlists, and it became more popular that way. I suppose it's a bit like if you've ever been to those sort of holiday parks and you sort of hear a new song for the first time along with some familiar themes like, I know that I'm showing my age now, but the Ketchup song or the Macarena, you get the idea. Or YMCA, actually, it's a favourite of people, by the Village People, actually. So, you get the idea. Familiarity improves the chances of adoption. Then the next point we discussed in terms of getting adoption was based on the article we wrote that Khaled put up on LinkedIn, and I can share the link in the episode in the show notes. But it was around why do so many finance and accounting transformations fail? And we used the example of whether we wanted to become the Netflix or Blockbuster of finance and accounting. And essentially this bit involves taking care of business and identifying opportunities to perhaps start small, because wholesale change is very rarely successful. Rather, you've got to build these sort of small surgical strike forces or small teams or just minor modifications of what people already identify as similar. Comes back to that familiarity angle, but also provide resources that aren't really consumed with the present culture to allow the emergence of the idea. The challenge with Netflix and Blockbuster was very much had an incumbent strategy and wanted to do things as usual, and you had the emergent strategy in Netflix, which completely took Blockbuster by surprise. And then the final key element is that what's in it for me? Identifying those value gaps from the perspective of the person being impacted by the change or what you're proposing, the insight you're proposing, and seeing out, is it something that they really want to have? It may be that they need to have it, but unless it's something that they want, it's going to be very difficult to convince them to buy in and adopt. And also the gap from where it is that they have to get what they want. So building credibility in terms of having an idea of how it needs to be resourced up. In finance, we're prime examples of this. A lot of finance leaders out there still view their own finance teams as cost centres. So if you want to go and undertake any additional initiative, it's very difficult to request additional funds. You're always trying to find some sort of way of doing more for less, or maybe getting creative around, perhaps there might have been a bit of attrition in the team, and diverting those funds to undertake a project that might actually prevent further attrition or further recruitment costs of trying to hire more people. So that's where you might find some advantages of getting funding for things like the RPA, robotic process automation, enhanced visualizations, leveraging machine learning, and so on. There's got to be something in it for the person making the decision and whom you ultimately want to adopt what you're proposing. So look, I hope those 3 ingredients were useful for you. I'd be also keen to understand what other ingredients you think might be required to help others buy in more successfully and adopt what you're proposing. And that's the whole point of the Strength in the Numbers show, and why we bring on guest mentors, so they can share with you what works, what probably doesn't work as well, so that we can all benefit in our profession and go on to have rewarding, meaningful and successful careers in accounting and finance. So look, hope you enjoyed this week's show, and if you did, please remember to share it with your colleagues and friends. We're on all the major platforms: iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, YouTube and Spotify, and really appreciate you investing your time with us today. So until next time, take care of yourselves, and let's keep on building our strength in the numbers.